Yeah, it says 58. 58,
Shall we do the niceties first?
yeah.
Right. We'll try as best to get done pretty quick. It is only 58, so we're 2 minutes before, so we'll do the housekeeping first. We're not intending to have a fire alarm, so if you do actually hear it, then please leave the building at your nearest option and meet and congregate up in the top car park outside. Thank you very much. Okay. And I'd like to welcome you all tonight to our Governance and Resources Committee meeting. And with that, I'm going to go and start with apologies.
We've received apologies tonight from councillors Allison, Chapman, Raw, Slack and Wakeman, and Councillor Buckle is attending as substitute.
Chair, I've had a text from Councillor Salt. He's on his way. He should be about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Also for Councillor Cruz, I mean, he's has difficulty coming from Derby, you know, at this time of night.
Okay. So we could have some late entrances. Well, obviously, if we've started in a debate on something, then obviously they won't be able to vote on that item on the agenda, but the subsequent ones they will be able to. Okay, thank you. Approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Moved by Councillor Dyer, seconded by Councillor Purdy. All in favour? Thank you. Item 3, public participation. I do believe we've got a speaker. Do any of the other council members speak on this one? No. Okay. Well, I will invite Mr. Jenkins up to come and have your say. Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I've been asked by Mr. Goodall, the landowner, in relation to item number 6 on the Brailsford allotments, to speak on his behalf tonight. He's been negotiating with the Allotment Holders Association, and there is an offer on the table for a new site on good agricultural land off Church Lane in Brailsford. Proposals include hedging and fencing, a car park, mains water. There will also be a long-term lease to secure the future of the allotments. The existing allotment site is not ideal. There is no car park, there is no proper junction onto the A52, there's no pavement along that side of the A52, and vehicles park on the grass verge, often in a very haphazard manner. And there's no proper junction to leave or enter the road either. Now, your officers in their report do not believe that there is a shortage of allotments in the district, and therefore the Council's duty under the 1908 Allotments Act has been fulfilled and is not obliged to purchase this piece of land. In addition, the landowner's solicitor has made some further points which I've been asked to say to you tonight. Section 23 of the 1908 Act requires the Council to form an opinion as to whether there is a demand for allotments in its area. Section 25 of the Act allows the Council to acquire land for allotments if there is a need. The Council cannot single out one plot of land without considering other options available, such as the purchase by agreement of other land. And without considering other sites and without an agreed process for choosing sites, any compulsory purchase application will be subject to further legal consideration, because both section 23 and 25 have to be properly fulfilled. But I think in this circumstance, it is clear from your officer's report that without the demand, without the shortage of allotments across the district, that it would not be appropriate for this body to seek to compulsory purchase this parcel of land. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, gentlemen. We were told you were running late, so we do understand. Move on to item 4. Any interest? Does anybody wish to declare any interest? No? Thank you. Item 5. Questions. Have we got any questions?
None unnoticed, Chair.
Nobody to ask a question? Oh, we had one earlier. How long are we going to be? As long as it takes. Okay.
No, I asked you if you had any bets on that.
Oh no, I didn't have any bets on. No, I can assure you we don't do that. Well, I don't anyway. I just tell you that we're going home, end off. Right, okay. Item 6, the Brailsford allotments. So I'll just bring in Paul to give a...
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, this report is presented to members because there is currently no delegated authority to officers to deal with matters of this nature. So the report outlines that the Council has received a request from the Brailsford Allotment Holders Association, the District Council, to consider the potential compulsory purchase of land on which their allotments are currently sited. This is due to the landowner's desire to effectively take back control of that land. In terms of an update to the report, I have actually received further correspondence from the Allotment Holders Association, which outlines the fact that there is a petition of over 70 signatures which has been running in the village post office for about a month, and that they also consider that there is legal powers under section 23 for the council to compulsory hire land for the provision of allotments in addition to acquisition. The report does make out the legal context of this, and Mr Jenkins has just touched on that within his report, but the substantive issue for the council to consider is whether it indeed needs to take control of a situation such as this. There are a number of allotments across the Derbyshire Dales, and the District Council does not have a detailed involvement in the vast majority of those. Allotments under the legislation from 1908 can quite equally be provided by parish councils as well as district councils, or allotment associations themselves, and that is very much the prevalent position across the majority of the district. Paragraph 2.5 outlines the concerns that officers have insofar as this isn't something which is included in the council's asset management plan in terms of how we would use our resources. There is currently no provision within the capital programme for such an acquisition, and council would have to make a decision on that should this matter proceed further. The cost of acquisition is also not known, but perhaps most importantly, there is clearly an offer of a site. So this is a disagreement between the Allotment Holders Association and the same landowner, who is actually trying to provide an alternative site which in his view is more conducive to allotment use. So taking all of those into consideration, officers feel that this isn't an issue for the District Council to become involved. The matter either needs to be resolved between the landowner and the Allotment Association, or indeed the Parish Council could actually take more of a keen interest in this matter themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I am willing to take questions at the moment, but be pertinent with them. Councillor Swindle.
Question, Chair, and then I will come back for comment later. I don't know if this question can be answered, but how many allotments are there on the site, individual allotments? And looking at the petition, I think 76 people have signed it. Do we know if there's a waiting list for these allotments? Are people queuing up for them, or is it just currently the people that are there? I don't know if, I wondered if the ward member might be able to answer those, Chair. Thank you.
Chairman, I don't have any information on the number of allotments on the site or indeed whether there is a waiting list. Other members may be in a better position than I to comment on that.
Councillor Morley, I'm going to give you the opportunity because obviously you are the actual ward member of Brailsford. Have you got any information that can be led over to the committee?
I have, thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is that there's 20 of these allotments on this almost 1 acre site, so I understand. Whether there's a waiting list, I don't know. It's a very difficult one to decide on, really, because they've been using this land apparently for some 183 years, and a lot of work's been done looking at the historical value of such a community asset, of the well-being of individuals. It's a meeting place, exercise for older people sometimes, and also its interaction with others as well, as far as the community is concerned. As I say, it's such a difficult one because Brailsford itself has had its village eroded over the years in so many ways. And I have been to additional meetings with where the parish council has been attending, and also the chairman of the Allotment Association as well, and secretary, etc. What remains of the village, in inverted commas, is very little now. And I feel that this asset is, as I've said before, without repeating myself, being eroded. However, I do have to consider also our own green agenda and the pledges that we've made to looking after communities. That's something else that I've got feet in both camps, I suppose, really. In fairness, the report is very detailed and it's a very full report. If you have a look at 2.5 in the report, then there's a couple of things there that I'm a little unsure about, because although we can assume that the land will be used for allotments under the asset management plan, it doesn't make any direct reference in the application to the use of allotments. The costs aren't known. And in fairness, an alternative site has been offered. Had no site come forward, then I think my argument, if you like, as Ward Council would probably be stronger. I will also have to say, and I'm fully aware that this is on YouTube as well, I'm disappointed that there's no direct representation from either the Parish Council or the Allotment Association this evening. That to me would demonstrate commitment. I'm not saying that they're not committed, but to me that would concrete a commitment. I think that's probably my I hope, balanced view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Fitter, question?
Both my questions have been answered by the two previous speakers, so
Thank you very
I'll
much.
follow.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had quite an interest in this item because for 15 years I was a member of the Wirksworth Town Council that was repeatedly being asked to provide allotment space in Wirksworth. The allotments were sadly lost many years ago, and they had to combine forces with Middleton for the provision of allotments, but that has some problems, of course. The questions I would like to ask are, to some extent, would have been questions for a member of the Parish Council or the Allotment Association, I have to say. But I'll ask them in case Paul happens to know why. Why, for instance, the alternative site is viewed as unsuitable? Are there particular elements there that make it so? Is it the size? Is it the access? I thought I heard that there was some provision being made to make it an acceptable site in terms of water supplies, for instance, which would be very essential there. So there's that question. The next question is actually related more to ourselves through the district's involvement, because I always thought that this was essentially a parish town council matter under the Act, and not something that the district has a responsibility for. So again, just putting that aside, as it were, the point that officers do not believe there is a shortage of allotments across the district seems to infer that allotments are a shared district resource, if I can put it like that. and like works with Middleton's alliance, there's a suggestion that maybe parishes should come together to supplement their land there. I mean, is that a view that is being put forward in that particular point?
I can certainly respond to those points, Chairman. In terms of the suitability of the site which has been offered, in the correspondence I've received from the Allotment Society, they say that it's approximately a mile from the existing allotments. It may well need to be accessed by people in private car. They say that the green stroke church lane is already difficult to navigate due to proximity to the medical centre, so they conclude that it's not as accessible as the current site, although clearly Mr Jenkins contradicts some of those assertions in the points that he made earlier. In terms of the actual provision of allotments, Councillor Radcliffe is absolutely right, because the legislation from 1908, it does talk about, and again as Mr Jenkins pointed out, the fact that a district council or a parish council can exercise the right to assess the demand for allotments and then determine whether it has a sufficient number of allotments such that provision should be made. Now, from the point of view of the district council, we have 17 allotment sites across the district. We only have an active involvement in 2 of them, and that is largely by historic circumstance. One very notable one is at Waterloo Lane in Ashbourne, which the district council owned the land, but clearly the Allotment Association managed that site themselves. So our historic role has been very, very limited, and certainly not to the extent of us compulsorily acquiring land for the provision of allotments, but we would certainly encourage it. It's a good thing to do for the reasons that Councillor Mrs Morley outlined, and where we can assist, we would certainly look to assist, but not assist to the extent that is being sought in this application.
Okay. Councillor Hughes.
Councillor Hughes, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Perhaps Mr Wilson or Councillor Morley could answer it for me. I assume that from what you've just said, that the new site would be on Church Lane in Brailsford, and is that correct?
That is the information that I've been provided.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor?
Still one question.
No.
To move it, Chair, when you're ready.
Are there any more questions to come from this? Okay then. So we're going to move into debate. Oh, Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just like Councillor Radcliffe, a few years back when I was in the Ashbourne Town Council, we had the same request for allotment, and the society come to us, and we was obviously obliged to find the allotment, which is on Waterloo Lane now, and it was no problem. It's all through the parish council, and just from straight to the district, we got it. That was simple as that. So, in my opinion, the parish council should be very much involved in this at the moment, rather than staying away from it. So, that's my opinion.
Thank you. Comment on that one. Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move the officer's recommendations, Chair. It's evident that due diligence has been given to this and much inspection by our officers. We can't declare it a community asset. And as has been said by Councillor Radcliffe and Donnelly, I agree. I think it's a parish council matter, which can I'm sure, be resolved. And I agree with Councillor Mrs Morley. It is a shame that the representatives are not here to state their case. So I move the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder?
It does, Chair. Can I just
Councillor Radcliffe, yes, you can make a comment.
The one thing I would want to go out, though, from this is that we fully support allotments. That we are behind them. There has been a resurgence, as you know, with led by the transition movement about sustainability, grow your own, etc. It's not just about the quality of the produce, it's the fact that you're doing something which is environmentally sound. So, let's make sure that the public do pick up on that the district are constrained, as it were, by their responsibilities in this, and the request on compulsory purchase. It's not that we are against allotments per se, we're solidly behind them, but we don't have the primacy in moving this forward for Brailsford.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Could I just seek a point of clarification, please? If I understood correctly, Mr Jenkins mentioned about mains water for the new site, or for the alternative site, and that a car park would also be included. Is that my correct understanding?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Right, Councillor Jenkins, just for confirmation. Not Councillor Jenkins. I do beg your pardon. My goodness. No, you haven't got Councillor next to your name, have you? Mr Jenkins, sorry about that. Could you just actually clarify what...
What Councillor Morley has said, the landowner has told me that the site would be provided with a car parking area, stone car parking area, and would also be provided with mains water as well.
Right, thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you, because I wasn't made aware of that, just made aware of that at all, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Sorry, Councillor Swindle.
I've done them to prolong it, Chair, but I will go with a recommendation. Just to say, I don't envy you, Councillor Mrs Morley, because we all know what it's like when we get these issues of contention in our wards and we have to pick a side, and whatever we do, someone's not going to be happy. But those of you who are town and parish councillors will also have been in this situation, and when there is a local dispute, they constantly look for a judge, jury and executioner, and in this occasion it's the district council. But I don't think, I agree with what Councillor Ratcliffe says, it's not that we're against allotments, it's not that we don't want to see the future of allotments in Brailsford. I just don't think this is our sort of involved, shouldn't be involved. And when it comes to compulsory purchases, I think it's not something we should take very lightly. We should only use those powers in extreme cases where we really, really do need that land for a very good reason. I think otherwise we're going to open up a can of worms here, and every little parcel band across the district, we could have somebody come to this authority and say, we need it. Again, costs not known and so on. But perhaps the district council's role could be a little bit different. Wherever we can, or officers can help, is rather than trying to purchase a piece of land, help the allotment association find a new land and accommodate them on a new piece. And before anybody in Brailsford shoots me down, I was one of the very few members who voted against the local plan sites in Brailsford, so I'm still on your side, Brailsford. Unfortunately in this one, I just don't think it's our involvement. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so with that, it has been proposed and seconded. All those in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Item 7, the Internal Audit Operational Plan for 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the purpose of this report is to present the draft internal audit plan for approval. The audit plan has been prepared taking into account the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards. We try to align the plan to the Council's key risk areas and the Council's objectives. So when we're preparing the plan, we discuss with the Head of Resources and the corporate leadership team, and we also have a look at what's on your strategic risk register. So when we're formulating the plan, we try to identify all of the Council's activities and operations and assess those for risk using a SIPFA-based methodology. The sort of things we take into account are materiality, so how much money is involved, how many transactions are there, also the control environment, what's our previous experience, were controls strong or weak, sensitivity, how damaging it will be to the Council's reputation if something went wrong in the area concerned, and any management concerns. So the higher we score a system, the more frequently we'd look at that. So typically some of the main financial systems, such as benefits, we'd look at probably every year, where some other areas we would look at infrequently. So operational areas, as a rule of thumb, if we see them as medium risk, we try to look at them every 2 to 3 years, and low risk would perhaps be every 3 to 5 years.
Appendix 1 is just a note to try and explain some of the terminology that we use. And Appendix 2, this shows the plan itself. It gives you a 5-year broad detail, so what we have looked at for 1819 and 1920, and then the middle column is the areas we're proposing to look at in 2021. 21, 22 and 22, 23, they're just indicative, so we will revisit them next year because the council's priorities may have changed or risks may have changed, but that's just an idea at this stage. The planned number of days is 241, and that's the same as last year, and that gives you one full-time auditor working based at the district council working on those audits, and then my time on top of that. So the plan covers a range of audits from main financial systems to operational audits. This year we have got 2 new audits we're suggesting. First is climate change, and that's because it's a really important issue to the council, so we think it's important to look at how you're progressing along with your objectives for that. And the second is ethics, and that's because my professional body, SITFA, are really keen that auditors look at ethics, things like the code of conduct, gifts and hospitality, expenses, allowances, are members and officers made aware of ethical behaviours and standards when they're introduced to the council, things like that. So there isn't a magic formula for how many audit days there are, but I'm happy that this 2021 plan will give me enough coverage to be able to provide you with an audit opinion at the end of the year as to the other controls and governance arrangements that you've got in place. So the recommendation is the internal audit plan for 2021 be approved, and I'll try and answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Councillor Flitter.
Well, no questions, Chair, because I feel that, what's important to me is not how many days we spend on this, but it's the content of the scoping exercise. And I think that's pretty good in this scoping exercise, and we're aiming at the right things. And when it comes to the time you want that moving, I'm happy to
I will take it now if you wish to move it. Then I will take it as being moved. Councillor Hughes, I see you want to speak. Do you want to second this as well?
I'll second it too, yes.
Thank you very much.
I agree with Councillor Flitter. When I got to this point in the agenda, I looked to see whether under cross-cutting issues climate change was there, and I was very pleased and impressed that it was. And I've just got one question to ask associated with that. Yeah, I know the lack of a strategy, and I think that's the right point at this stage. But going forward, there will be the need to perhaps look at the evaluation of decisions made or proposed decisions for their impact on climate change. Will that be part of the audit in future years once the strategy has been defined?
What we'll do at the start of the audit is we'll scope the audit with the relevant officer and decide then what the key points to look at and where we're going to focus. So we would take out a strategic view this year and look at what's been approved by members in the plan, how that fed down into an action plan, what resources you'd got to be able to fulfil the plan that you've agreed, and then moving forward, if we felt we needed it in following years and following up action, we would do that.
Would you be looking for a comment, a heading in each report saying impact on climate change or something like that?
That's something we could look at and discuss with your officers and see if it is something that the council wants to go ahead with.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rafford. Sorry, I didn't look across. I do beg my pardon. And you were blinking at me, wasn't you? I do beg my pardon.
Yeah. Well, you are a good chair. Actually, my questions more or less have been answered, but just for the sake of it, I'll just reinforce what my colleague, Councillor Flitter, said before about. It's the audit is successful because of its breadth and also because we know it's going to be very efficiently carried out and scrutinised. My question before would have been about this climate change audit, which I welcome. But can I just put a marker down at this point and say, I for one, and I've no doubt there'll be lots of other councillors, would like and love to see this audit scrutiny report when it's completed, because we all have such an interest and stake in it. So I know that a lot of these audits tend not to be fed back, but this is one particular one I would really welcome an oversight of when it's completed.
Certainly, yes, we could either attach the full report or I could give a detail of what we found.
That's lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favour?
Unanimous.
Thank you very much. Item 8, revised complaints procedure. Sandra, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I come to the committee on an annual basis to report on our complaints monitoring, and in the last report I promised to come back to you with a revised scheme which would enhance the current arrangements to reduce overall timescales and introduce some organisational learning. So the complaints procedure that you have in front of you builds on the existing system, and the main provisions are contained in 1.3 of the report. The main benefit for me is in terms of the ability for the organisation to learn. We're putting the first point of contact complaints to senior managers, and it will be their role to actually identify any particular trends in repeat complaints, so they can have an assessment and a better understanding of what makes a repeat complaint prior to you having the annual report for a more strategic level of consideration. I'm hoping the report is self-explanatory, Chair.
Thank you, Sandra. Well, I believe, as she said, it is self-explanatory, and I do believe it will bring a bit more clarity to it and hopefully get minor things that turn to be major solved a bit quicker. So, anybody else got any questions? Councillor Splitter?
Yeah, thank you. It's the last point in this that interests me, and I'm glad it's there, and that's unreasonable persistent complaints. So I think we all know certain people that will not let issues go. And the question really is, who defines when it starts becoming unreasonable and how we treat it? Because there are those, no matter what answers you give or what the procedure is, their view is always the most paramount. And, you know, it does become tiresome sometimes, but we have to have a way of controlling that.
Yeah, we do have a separate protocol on unreasonable or persistent complaints, and the current practice is that individual officers or councillors would draw them to my attention as complaints officer. And what I'm keen on in terms of any adverse reaction where someone might go to the local government ombudsman, for instance, is that there is an audit trail and that there is a pattern of behaviour that can be clearly identified, rather than being the case where we just don't want to answer your question, we're going to stop you from asking that question ever again. That's not what we're here for. But there are occasions where there is a pattern of behaviour where it's quite clear that we've done our best in trying to answer that question and the person for some reason is not listening. And there are a rare number of those complaints. There have been instances in the past where we've had to bar a person from accessing the council on a particular route if they have a clear pattern of behaviour which establishes the fact that we have done our best to try and resolve those matters. They're extremely rare and they have to be a quite high bar in terms of persistency. But in my role as complaints officer, delegated authority is given to me to deal with them.
Thank you. Councillor Cruz.
Thank you, Chair. I support the report and the amendments to the procedure. I do have a question, which is around the annual reporting and the member involvement. I've been contacted by residents where they've had a complaint where things haven't been dealt with quickly enough. It's not very frequent, I have to say, but I'm curious to know what you think member involvement should be. I don't want to dabble in the day-to-day operations of the team. I think that's for the team to sort out. But the annual reporting, it's fairly infrequent. A problem could emerge in my ward and I wouldn't know about it. So I'm just wondering what the level of information there could be that could be provided as part of this revised procedure. So let's say information flow to the various members of each ward.
Currently the annual reporting, and I think the last time we reported we identified a deficiency in that because it's a matter of fact and it can be up to 12 months old that we're reporting back. One thing that I identified was that we had a repeat nature of complaints that we accepted without investigation. So why are there, for example, 6 complaints on car parking year on year without understanding what was the nature of the complaint? Is there anything that we can do to break that cycle? Hence, this goes down to a senior manager level who are hopefully in charge of their service and can make minor amendments. It's rare that complaints are ward-based, but I'm happy to include something in there in the internal procedure where senior managers actually keep ward members involved. But it's rare that matters would actually come down to a ward level, the very nuts and bolts about a particular service.
Thank you.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's more of an observation, perhaps, rather than a comment, but no doubt Sandra just might wish to make a quick response. But over the life I've had as a councillor, a number of residents have come to me, directly to me, with complaints, and I've been able, because of my access within the council and familiarity with service departments, etc., being able to facilitate the resolution of that. And I say, I just wanted to make that observation. So this is something that arose that might well have had a formal status and gone through a bureaucracy, if I can put it like that, but in fact, in my role, I've been able to, bring about a reconciliation.
Thanks. I think that's one of the other issues that we've recognised, that ward members bring issues to us, perhaps not complaints with the official C for the complaints. And I think these will be captured under this procedure, because what we acknowledged was that we do resolve issues very well at the first point of contact, but we don't record that currently, and I think we're highly successful in that. So this procedure will capture those issues that you bring to us and the fact that we have resolved them. Hope that helps.
Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Chair. I think I know the answer, but just to test it out, please. 1.7, the main benefit of automation will be the ability to examine actual response targets. Is that to be embedded in the new transformation system that we're bringing in?
It will, Councillor Purdy. The backbone of this, when we can get it up to speed, will be the new CRM. But just to reassure you that the procedure works equally well should someone continue to raise a complaint in person, by phone or the traditional means. But any complaint, once we are automated, if it is in person or by phone, will be inputted onto the CRM. That's one of the major benefits for us.
Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going really back to the persistent complaints again. One type of persistent complaint is the wit's end complaint. The people are at their wit's end because whatever the council does, it can't resolve the problem, and they can't resolve the problem for good reasons. And officers do their best, but the problem can't be resolved. And unfortunately, it tends to have a negative impact on the council's brand. And is there anything we can do? Could officers think about how we might resolve that and get over that problem of damage to our standing?
I think you're right. There are those, the nature of the complaints, and I think in here we have to be honest about when it's the end of the road for us. And the persistent complainants procedure is about drawing a line in the sand there. It may be a strong measure, but sometimes it's the only way to break that conversation. I think one thing's clear, you'd like to see a copy of the persistent complainants procedure just so that you can see for yourself. I've referenced it in the complaint because I think it's important, but it is the last resort,
and occasionally it's the only way to put the full stop at the end of an issue.
Yes, it's perhaps just going, before it gets to that stage, the person is upset, clearly upset, but we can't really do anything, or the officers can't really do anything more to help them. And so they're left, the problem is then left unresolved, and there is then damage to the reputation of the council potentially. And I was wondering if we could do something about it at that stage to try and, we could think about how we might ensure that our reputation, when that happens, that's really what I'm thinking.
Yeah, we'll take that on board, Councillor Hughes, with during the process design.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Flitter, I do believe you said you was in agreement with this. Would you like to move it?
Yes, certainly will.
Councillor Cruz, second.
Yep, that's it.
All in favour? Thank you. Item 9, arrears for write-off. Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to apologise for members and point out that there's actually a typing error in the recommendation. The amount in the recommendation should be £128,529.96, and that will then match the figure in the table in the report. So the debts identified in this report have been pursued by all the usual methods of recovery that are set out in the Council's debt recovery policy. And further action isn't possible in some cases where there's a liquidation or insolvency. And in other cases, we consider them to be uneconomic to pursue. As I've said in the report, should further information come to light, such as the whereabouts of somebody who we currently can't trace, then the debt can be reinstated and we can recommence the recovery action. The write-offs that we're asking the committee to approve are listed in Appendix 1. These are write-offs with a value of £1,500 or more. I have delegated authority to write off amounts under £1,500, and they're listed in the table. There's been a significant increase in write-offs, especially those relating to non-domestic rates, several of which are as a result of bankruptcies and liquidations. And councils are not preferential creditors, so often, even if we pursue it, we get very little back. The figures for write-offs seem quite high in terms of value, but you need to think of them in the context of the amounts of money that we're actually collecting. So for council tax, the write-offs for the year total £62,247, which seems a lot, but that actually represents 0.1% of the £55 million that we hope to collect in the year. The non-domestic rates, total write-offs are £160,000, and that represents 0.8% of the £19 million we collect. For housing benefit overpayments, the figure's a bit higher. Total write-offs there represent about 9% of the amount collectible. But for housing benefits, as it says in the report, recovery is very difficult, and we have to allow people a long time to pay. It should also be noted that for council tax and business rates write-off, Derbyshire Dales acts as billing authority, so we don't actually stand the full cost of any write-offs. So for council tax, we only stand 14% of the cost of any write-offs, and for business rates, 40%. I'm asking you to approve the officer recommendation to write off the amounts in Appendix 1.
Councillor Ratcliffe, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Each time, in my experience, that the write-off paper annually falls on our desk, there's always that twinge of apprehension about the amounts that we're dealing with. And of course, there are two ways that you can analyse it. On the one hand, you've got the pragmatic. In any other situation, if you were to say to me that we're going to forego £277,000 almost £500 of income, I'd say, goodness me, you know, what are we playing at? This is money that would be extremely valuable. But on the other hand, of course, this is money that hasn't come in to us in the first place. And secondly, of course, we have this budgetary provision under written, as it were, to deal with that, with more than compensates this time round for it, because we have this provision of 460,000 there. But there is this perceptive analysis, isn't there, that somehow or other, you know, we're losing this amount of money. But as Karen has always explained, and very well to my mind, for those who still doubt the process, you know, it is covered, and it's a very small amount in the overall thing. But I would just like to make one suggestion or comment, if you like, Karen, for again, just to confirm, at the lower end, the sort of 1,500 and less, that you don't call for a write-off, that you know you have a regulatory powers. It seems to me that a large number of that amount would be people who are caught up in the welfare benefit trap, if you like, and they might be better off, and we would in turn be better off if they were excluded from pursuance altogether. I'm referring to those at the moment that are expected to pay the additional, not the additional, but the 8.5% of the council tax, because they don't receive 100% at the moment. It seems to me if we were to bring them into that 100%, we would incur reduced perhaps recovery costs if we were going to attempt that, and any court action as such. So it seems to me a bit of a win-win situation for both of us there. And I know that there is some discussion at the moment about you know, looking at whether or not there might be something there for us to pursue, despite the fact that it has certain obstacles to be overcome with the county council as such. But all in all, as I say, I think it seems to me that, you know, whilst we are looking at, on paper, fairly high sums, those sums are all contained within the very much the larger financial responsibilities that this comes under, and is not something for us to get unduly concerned about. So I'll be willing to move the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Ratcliffe. We'll take that as being moved.
Councillor...
No, sorry. I've got Councillor Morley. Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a point of clarification, really. Looking at the non-domestic rates write-off, there seems to be quite a lot of unable to trace. It seems to be round about £19,000. What mechanism, if I understand this correctly, is there in place to stop this being repeated in other areas? Is this from people who haven't paid their rents, or have I read this incorrectly?
This is people who haven't paid business rates.
Right, so where we've got unable to trace, just supposing that one of these perpetrators, for want of a better word, started up in business elsewhere, 50 miles away, 30 miles away, and did the same sort of thing, is there any link between authorities? The reason I ask this is in the academic world we had a naughty list, if you like. All the awarding bodies had a list of educational institutions who were known for trying to pull the wool over the awarding body's eyes, that sort of thing. And I was just wondering, with the amount of money involved here, is there something like that other councils would speak with?
As far as I'm aware, there isn't one big
naughty list,
naughty list that we could go to. But there are some things that we do. So first of all, we do use tracing agencies to try to trace people. So we'd hope that they might track them. Also, we do have powers to request information from another authority. So if we get wind that business is set up somewhere else, we can formally ask for that information about that business. And finally, we do participate in the National Fraud Initiative, and they often do data matching exercises.
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Yeah, I was just interested in the third one down on Appendix 1, where people have, or somebody's been in receipt of housing benefits and so forth. It goes back to 2008, 2011. So is this the full total of the debt, or has it decreased any since then? Because it's a long time ago to come on to the sheet now. Page 26
Right.
on the, no, 28 on the agenda.
So this debt dates back quite a while, and I think they have been recovering some of the debt over the years, but the person's now got a debt relief order. So basically, this is where they go to the Citizens Advice Bureau and they work with them to apply for a debt relief order, which basically asks us to write off the debt. And that's what's happened in this case.
Thank you.
Councillor Purdy.
I don't think you've got a second, but if you haven't, I'm prepared to second Councillor Ratcliffe's motion. A couple of questions, please, though, Karen.
Yep.
One, is there any rule within CIFRA or your financial organisations on debt recovery? Is there any discussions around any better methods? And second, I suppose it's too early to give you an answer on this, what impact do we think will happen from the budget announcement on business rates?
To take the first of those questions, it's quite timely you should ask me about CIFRA's advice on debt recovery, because just this morning an email popped into my box to say they've issued some new guidance on it. So I am planning, we've already started work on reviewing our debt recovery policy, and I'm hoping to go back to that over the coming months. So I will be bringing a paper on that, and I'll be able to tell you when I've read it what CIFRA said. On your second one about the business rates, we've obviously had a look at what the Chancellor said. We've downloaded an extract of his speech and the report, but so far we haven't heard directly from MHCLG about the details of the business rate reliefs. It might be some days before they issue that, maybe weeks. They do acknowledge, I saw something today where they did acknowledge that bills have just gone out, and they did say that local authorities will be reimbursed for the measures, including the cost of having to rebill. What we've done is Giles Dan and I liaised, and Giles sent out a business letter to draw the attention of businesses on that list to the reliefs. But we're having to tell them at the moment that we're still waiting for the guidance from government.
Thank you.
And we will have to update software, probably. So there will be a lag while we wait for the software suppliers to write the modules and then send it to us to update.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Swindle. Question?
Thank you, Chair. My heart just sank a little bit then when you said the council tax bills have gone out. So that means I'm going to have a very, very busy day. Either tomorrow or hopefully not on Saturday. Karen, just a few quick questions. First one, table 2.3, showing that council tax collections and domestic rates collections are, well, they're still very good and high. They're sort of dropping slightly towards the end. I just wonder if you've got any comment on as to why that might be. The other question I have is you talk about tracing agencies and so on. Once these debts are written off following this meeting, is that it? Are they forgotten about, or if their name comes up, we still continue to pursue them and try to get that money? And my final question is, we used to sort of get their names on here. I'm sure now under the new regulations we don't. So it's kind of hard for us as members or the public to sort of say, oh, we know where that person is, which we're always sort of encouraged to do. And I just sort of wondered, that's a problem really, isn't it? I don't know what I'm asking you there.
Naughty list.
I think you're asking, can you make an auto list, if I'm right to say it?
I know I asked those questions, but just on Councillor Mrs Morley's point about tracing people, I know when people have been looking at getting a house, for example, previously through Dale's Housing and so on, and they've not paid rent or they've done damage to the property or not paid their council tax, if I as a ward member was told about this person, I've gone to Dale's Housing and they've shared information, I'm sure it does happen, and that person didn't get that house. I guarantee they didn't get a house in Derbyshire, so it's just a point of information. Thank you.
On the tracing debts, yeah, we do use agencies to try to trace people, and in a lot of cases they're successful, and we're able to pursue the recovery to their new address.
So even after that is written off, it's still...
No. Generally what would happen is after the write-offs tonight, I'll inform the council tax and business rates teams that you've approved the write-offs. They'll then go and log that on their systems. So generally they will not pursue that debt that's been written off again, unless someone says, something comes to light to find the whereabouts of someone. Obviously for insolvencies and that, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah. If something comes up.
Yeah, if something comes up. With regard to your query about the names that used to be on the report, we used to consider the report in the exempt part of the meeting with names, but we were advised that there was a data protection issue there, and it, a lot of local government is about being transparent in our decision making. So really, it's the role of the committee to challenge the processes we've got, make sure we're carrying out the correct processes and have the correct systems, rather than to comment on a particular case. And in all the time I was doing it with the names on, I think I've got one comment about a particular case, and I never got much follow-up.
Chair, just about the collection rates.
Oh yes, sorry.
Thank you.
The collection rates. The table 2 that shows the collection rates, the collection rates for all the previous years are for the whole year, but the final column on the right for 2019-20, obviously we're not finished that year. Yes. So those figures are only for 10 months. Okay. And they are on track, so we're expecting the outcome to be similar to previous years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. It's moved. Item 10, the Kirk Ireton Neighbourhood Plan 2021. Mike, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just by way of introduction, normally a report on neighbourhood plans would be presented to the Community and Environment Committee, but as you'll see in paragraph 1.5, with the agreement of the Chair, we've brought this to this meeting to enable us to consider this and to enable the neighbourhood plan to move forward to the referendum stage to be held on the 7th of May, and it allows the necessary arrangements to be made for a referendum if a decision is made tonight to accept our recommendations. Chair, this is the fourth neighbourhood plan now to get to the examination stage. And as you'll see in the report, the examiner who's undertaken the work on behalf of ourselves has by and large agreed with the comments that we've made as a district council, but he's also made recommendations to ensure that the final version of the neighbourhood plan is sufficient to address the basic conditions requirements, the conformity requirements, and also to make the policies that are contained within the neighbourhood plan fit for purpose in terms of the determination of planning applications. There is a number of appendices to this report. The first one is the examiner's report. The second one is the table which sets out how the examiner has addressed the comments that we as an authority have made in the consultation process, and the final table is the consideration of the examiner's recommendations, and in pretty much all the cases we are saying no further action taken and accept the recommendations of the examiner and move forward to the referendum stage.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Hobson.
Chair, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation of the neighbourhood plan referendum, and I look forward to the result coming back to members at a later stage.
Councillor Donnelly.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that, Chair. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to make any comments? So, oh, sorry, Councillor Morley.
Just one point, please, on 1.5. And I've just had a phone call this evening that apparently the election of the Police and Crime Commissioner, the association has said that it's now going to be held in the autumn. Just a point, not on the 7th of May.
I'm going to move you over to the monitoring officer, Sandra, to give that.
As the counting officer, I've not yet been informed of that decision, although I know that the notice of election has been moved, but I haven't had formal confirmation that that is to be deferred at all.
Okay, through you, Chair. It was the candidate's husband that phoned this evening asking me about leafleting. That's what he said to me. So it's second hand.
There's been nothing confirmed as yet. Okay, I think it's expectations, but there's been nothing yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just upon that, if things are moved, obviously, if we go to agree with this, we will carry on, I take it, or will this not go ahead until the proper election?
I think, Chair, that if a decision is made not to have an election, it will be on the principle that the government isn't wanting a crowd of people in a small place all at the same time, and we might have to make a sensible decision on this neighbourhood plan. In any of the situations where we're deferring an election, no matter what, the government will have to put in place alternative arrangements, because there are a number of all-out elections at district level, not just the PCC. So I don't think it's as simple as that. I think any decision taken by the government will have to have standby arrangements for all probabilities, including this neighbourhood plan.
So upon that, obviously, we've had it moved and seconded. We obviously have to wait for the government's rulings of how it goes ahead, but can we take the vote to what our recommendations are here at the moment, please? All in favour? Thank you very much for that. Item 11, Member Development Working Group. Sandra, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm an advocate of the Member Development Working Group, and following a recent meeting of the Leaders Advisory Group, what you have before you is a set of terms of reference to repurpose the group. It has been dormant for some time, but I think it's an excellent vehicle for members to get involved in their own learning and development challenges and programmes for the future. You've been through your induction programme. I know you feel as if you needed added stamina to get through at this time, but what happens next should be very much in your hands and not an officer's. So the terms of reference attached to the report are an example, which I hope you feel have some merit. We're suggesting that the group has a membership of 8 based on the rules of political proportionate, only just to get balance. And I already have nominations from the Conservative group, should that number go ahead. The terms of reference, if you choose to adopt them, they're not cast in stone, and I would suggest that you allow the Member Development Working Group to have a good look at them and see if they want to adapt and amend over time, and perhaps come back to you if they feel they want to amend them in any significant form. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Flitter.
Thank you, Chair. I wish I had the same enthusiasm as Sandra on this. I'm perhaps too old in the hat to think about this, but I took this to the Little Democrat group not long ago and was met with stony silence. And I think that was because, of what happened or not happened or whatever, why it finished, I don't know. But this afternoon, I think I've managed to twist Councillor Hughes' arm to represent the Liberal Democrats, and I'm afraid you won't have to put up with me as well. So there could be some debate.
As I can recall, I was one of the members along with Councillor Hill and Hobson on this, and I think Councillor Morley ended up, was yourself? Oh no, it was Mr Morley was actually on it. And we did find it interesting because as we were newbies, I must admit, it was nice to be able to put things over and bring new things in. But I do believe that this members' development is going to be a little bit different than bringing in the new councillors and whether they're having their inductions. I think this is more of an importance in how this council is run and ideas to come forward to what we can put up. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move this and just to say that I'm not in total agreement with Councillor Flitter on this. I think it will be very useful for us newbies in order to put forward our points of view about what we need to know. And I found that in nearly a year now, I need to know more. I think I need to know more now than I did when I first started, because it is very, very complex. So I'm very pleased that this is going to go forward, and that there will be an opportunity for people to put forward their views, councillors to put forward their views about how development takes place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Does that find a seconder? Councillor Hill?
Yeah, I'll obviously second it, and I completely disagree with Councillor Flitter. But if I am on it, I will look forward to your... Sorry? I'll look forward to your input. I think we learned a lot at the beginning of this year, and things that could be improved, things that worked well, things that didn't. So let's see what we do.
Oof. I'm glad you are joining it actually, Councillor Flitter, because obviously having an older member of okay, said that in the wrong way, or a councillor that's been with this association for a very long while then, if it's put that way, rather than your age. I was taking upon how long you'd been with the council, not your age, but obviously you can see what's been done before and afterwards, so yeah. So with that, I'm not digging, you'll be glad I'm not on it. Okay, with that, it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour, please.
That's unanimous.
Thank you.
If I could just say, Chair, I could have the leading groups representatives either now or by email later. The group's nominations, just to confirm that I have the Conservative group's nominations, they are Councillors Hill, Lees, Atkin and Froggatt.
When are you expecting the first meeting?
I think we'd like one early April, if members could come back. And I'm really pleased that the nominations so far fit the profile, have been energetic. Thank you.
Claire Raw for us.
Claire, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Claire Hall.
I'm going to say this. Where are we at with this one? Gosh. Well done. Okay, with that we move on. Item 12, the joint consultative group minutes of the 29th of January meeting. Do I see a move?
Move it, Chair.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favour? Thank you. And item 13, referred items. I'll bring Paul in for this, thank you.
Yes, just very briefly, Chairman. These were the two referred items from the Joint Consultative Group. The first is relating to revisions to the Code of Conduct, and the second is to introduce a local agreement for the remuneration of staff engaged in major incidents or emergency situations, both of which were considered at the meeting that you've just approved the minutes of.
Councillor Purdy.
Happy to move them, Chair, and please Paul brought the two pertinent points out because it refers back to the goodwill of our staff who should quite rightly be remunerated. Thank you.
Chair, I'm happy to second.
Councillor Flitter, I'll take a second in that. Anybody else wishing to make a comment? Well, upon that, it's been proposed and seconded.
Sure.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Donald.
Yeah, I think it's a good paper. We had a very good debate, if I remember, and I think a lot of good stuff come out. It was quite interesting with the union guy been there the previous time, looking at all the transparency. You can believe what's happening in Derbyshire out where they come from. So I think it's a very good report.
Okay. With that, it's been proposed and seconded. All in favour? With that, thank you very much. I think that's all moved. Thank you for your attendance in this meeting, and I will close the meeting.